Go live, and it's preparing. Looks like we are live, Janine.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to Egg Harbor's book club, Between the Pages. And today we're talking about This Tender Land, written by William Kent Krueger. He's a real popular author at our library. He does a series of mysteries, but he's steered away from his genre for two books, Ordinary Grace, and then this newest one, This Tender Land. And This Tender Land is a story that's set in Minnesota in the summer of 1932 on the banks of the Gilead River, which I thought was a real river. I kept saying to my son, I'm reading this book about Minnesota, the Gilead River. And he kept on going, really, Mom? I don't know of that river. So it's not a
river too.
I do. But I'm looking at the map now that they, that's the site, and yeah.
Okay. Well, it's the Lincoln Indian Training School is where the story starts. It's a pitiless place where Native American children are forcibly separated from their parents, are sent to be educated. It's the home to Odie O'Banion, a lively orphan boy whose exploits constantly earn him the superintendent's wrath. Odie and his brother Albert are the only white faces among hundreds of Native American children at the school. After committing a terrible crime, which I don't even think is a terrible crime, I think it was justifiable.
Yeah,
I agree. Odie and Albert are forced to flee for their lives, along with their best friend Moses, a mute young man of Sioux heritage. Out of pity, they also take with them a broken-hearted little girl named Emmy. Together, they steal away in a canoe, headed for the mighty Mississippi in search of a place to call home. Over the course of one unforgettable summer, these four orphan vagabonds, journeying into the unknown, crossing paths with others who are adrift from struggling farmers and traveling faith healers to displaced families and lost souls of all kinds. I love this book. I don't know how all of you feel, but I
loved it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I did enjoy it.
It was well written. I loved the way he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is a really good writer. He is.
And have you read Ordinary? I haven't read Ordinary Grace. I think I'm going to give it a try because, yeah, I really like this story. And it's interesting, the people who read his mystery, it's all men who read his mysteries, and they just read every single one of them. And I think we have about 12 of his mysteries on our shelf right now that just go out constantly, and they love them. So they all take place in Minnesota, just like this one takes place mostly in Minnesota. Hey, Jess, can you share my screen?
You can do it. You're the host now.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to, let's see if I can do this here. No, that's not it.
Yeah, I really liked it. I guess I wouldn't probably read a Huckleberry style story if it wasn't for this book club. So it was nice. That's what I like about this club, is I'm reading things that I wouldn't normally pick up.
Yeah.
A Huckleberry type story, huh?
Right. Well, like their journey down the river, and like kids on a raft, and I guess it just.
Well, I compared it to the Odyssey, and then when I found out his name at the end, I thought, oh, this all correlates,
Right.
In a review, William Clark, the author, talked about how his influences were the Odyssey, which was his favorite childhood story, Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, and there's one other, but it escapes my mind. But there were elements of all three of those.
Dickinson.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. The Dickinsons with the orphans. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not happening here for some reason. Let me, because I was gonna pull up the map of their journey.
You want me to see if I can find it?
It's under William Kent Krueger. I don't know, my iPad is giving me the business, so it doesn't look like it's gonna let me. Yeah, William Kent Krueger, Tenderland Discussion Guide. If you want to get that up, that would be good.
St. Louis in the wrong spot, so I knew right away it was a phony map.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing, the Mississippi isn't there. I mean, it's a bizarre map.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so everyone has seen the map. That's good. Yeah, so now I don't feel bad
Okay,
about
I see it now. I see it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I liked his discussion guide because it really made me think more about it, the story. He had a Q&A and he had questions. And then he had a Spotify playlist that you can play for your book clubs. And it was all of the music from the book, all of the harmonica songs that he played. And so I really, it's a good discussion guide. So, yeah. Are you having any luck? My Mac here is really being fussy.
Can you
today.
guys not see the screen?
Yeah, we have it on the screen.
No, I can
We have
see
the
it.
map.
Okay.
I can
got
see the map. I can
Okay,
see
I
the
just-
map,
There.
but I
Yeah.
can't see anything else.
There, I see the map. Okay. And now I have it so itsy bitsy. I don't know. It's my, I don't know. I'm having tech problems today, but I can still talk. Yeah, so I kind of like the map just for it. Now I know it's not a real river and things are in the wrong place. And it was, I just liked the whole discussion guide. So everyone liked the book. Anyone not like the book?
It wasn't my favorite, I have to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't too crazy. It just seemed there was so much improbable about it. But then after I read, I think some of the notes, he had an author's notes at the back. Then I guess okay, maybe maybe some of this could have really happened, but I don't know. It was
What did you find improbable?
Just the extreme nastiness of the characters, some of the characters, and the kids surviving and thriving on a diet of practically nothing and going for days without food. Oh my gosh, it was so harsh. I just just thought it was over the top. That's all. I guess I like things being a little more like believably realistic, but like I said, I think the author made a good case that was kind of the way things were at that particular historical time.
In the 1930s, during the Depression, I think a lot of that was fairly logical or would happen, like those shanty towns and not eating and the things that transpired. And so I think for the time frame, it was fairly believable in some respects.
Yeah.
Because it was I think the most improbable part for me was his mother and the Black Witch. That whole scenario.
Yeah.
That was a real far-fetched part of it. I think.
Well, that was another thing that bothered me. His mother, supposedly she had these wonderful skills with sewing and design and that sort of thing. And finally at the end, she takes advantage of them. Not at the beginning. At the beginning of her life, independence, supporting herself, she turns to prostitution. I just thought that was
it was during the Depression. Yeah.
Prostitution would have been infinitely easier. Quicker money, And the mother doesn't really get explained. We don't really know why.
Right.
He just drops her on us that she was a prostitute and that she houses this house, that she is in this spot. He doesn't develop the mother. I understand your foibles about some things. One of the things that I found really amazing was the little distance they would go.
Yeah.
Nobody knew them in the little distance that they would go. It was hard for me to think in terms of no technology, no telephones. It was hard. That was one thing that was hard for me. I picked this book up and put it down 3 times because of the first description of the Indian school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I found it very hard, and as they overcame things and did things as a group and became bonded as a group and a family, I just thought they were incredible. I had tears in my eyes. I was like, why would a child ever have to live like this? But I think it was a realistic portrayal.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
I know, they took the indigenous children and they were going to teach them the white man ways because, of course, the Indian ways were terrible and horrible. I felt so sorry for those, just like in Australia when they took the indigenous people away from the Indian. We're so stupid as, white European people. I mean, every time we do something, we mess it up.
Yeah.
White
White supremacy.
I felt so sorry for those Indians and I believe it's a realistic view that they just took them away from these families and
Well, it's a known fact that they did it.
yeah.
Well, right. And
Right.
he did a lot of research when he, wrote this book. And I've read other period pieces about the Depression. I mean, and things were really rough. And it wasn't unusual for kids 12, 13 years old to be pushed out of their homes because
Right.
there wasn't enough food and to go off and find work in the city. And so I found this to be very believable. I mean, sure, some of the episodes that they had were a little, for drama. And for me, it was a page turner. I kept dreaming about what's going to happen to these kids.
Right.
The next morning I would get up at 5:30 and open the book. What happened?
Yeah.
But that part of it was, I think, part of Krueger's journey of taking us on this trip with these kids. And I became very attached to all of the characters. I thought his
And
character
my-
development was excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, in my, I can say like my grandmother, she was put in an orphanage. She was part Native American, but her father just put her and my great aunts in an orphanage in South Dakota because my great grandmother passed away and he just couldn't support them, so he put them in the orphanage. And the stories she'd tell me were awful. Like these, Catholic nuns or religious nuns that would be so awful to these kids that like as soon as they had the opportunity to leave, they were gone. So that for me just gives me goosebumps because it's just awful how some of these kids were treated.
And a lot of women or young girls that went into the convent and for that matter, young boys went into the seminaries during this period. It was very competitive to get in, but they went in there for a safe home, a safe place.
Right.
And so a lot of them were escaping, horrible, destitute family life. So they, sought the convents or the priesthood as a safety net.
There's
Little bit of Catholic history there. I'm giving myself away.
Yeah, there's a children's book author who just does nonfiction photo books. And Carol, I don't know if I got the name right. Russell Friedman, was it? Back from our children.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
did a lot of nonfiction. Yes.
And he did this wonderful book on the Native American children who went into the orphanages and the schools, not the orphanage schools, the Native American schools, and a picture of before and after pictures, and it's eerie. the look in their eyes.
Ugh.
It's just this blank stare, and it's this whole book of before and after of Native children, and it's making me want to look at it again because I think I now have a whole different. I mean, I never really read any books about this period with the Native American schools. I knew it happened because I think there's children's books about it, but I just that nonfiction Russell Friedman book was just stayed with me. That eerie look in their eyes is just.
Well, the fact that this author taught us about the Dakota incident, I don't know what the proper term is, of 1862. That's really horrible. Think of the kid.
Yeah.
Think of Mose. I mean, my God, they cut his tongue out.
That is,
Yeah.
that is
I mean,
unbelievable.
there was so much inhumanity in this book. It was incredible, and it was interesting where they found the humanity. They found it in Hooverville. They found it with Sister Eve, even with Sid, who they, and to a certain extent, they found it with Jack the farmer. Although that didn't work out quite as well, but one thing I was struck with is these kids are like 12 years old. What they're facing and learning is absolutely amazing. And the fact that they had the resilience, and I think that might have had something to do with the fact that although they were forced into a very adult world, they were children looking at it. You know, and they weren't really aware of the Depression until they buy a pair of boots.
Yeah.
And they had to lie about it. And because suddenly it was like, where'd they get the money?
Yeah. Well, they'd not been to town. They didn't understand the whole thing.
And the clerk said, when they said their father gave them the money, the clerk said, whoa, one of the lucky ones who has a job. And that's when they first begin to understand, because they were pretty isolated, and well, they were isolated in the school.
I wanted to share that my mother was the exact same age as Odie, so I kept thinking about what she still told me as stories when she was still alive. And she was born on the Mississippi River in Illinois, down near St. Louis. So I thought of her as I was, comparing her life on a very small farm, and my grandfather and his brothers farmed it with 2 elderly aunts, but it couldn't support the whole families. And so then the families had to move off this little farm during the Depression and find other work. But it was a fun read for me, because I kept putting my mother kind of, in the spirit of these 4 young kids as they're traveling down the Mississippi River. And so that was fun. And my other thought that I really wanted to share was the difference, the way Native Americans were treated in this book versus News of the World, where, and you guys all knew, I didn't, but that was a very appropriate portrayal of Native Americans. And so I was really appreciative of the way Native Americans were treated in this book.
Well, and Nancy, also to that, I liked that he referred to them as the Lakota versus Sioux. Sioux was the name that the white man gave the Lakota tribe. And I appreciated that, they referred to them as the Lakota, because that's who they were.
And the author didn't have them speak, any Native children. Even Mose didn't speak. They were all voiceless, and I think he did that purposely to show the betrayal of them. Well, anyone have feelings about that, about using that technique of not having them have a voice?
Yeah, because they didn't have a voice. Somebody somebody put them on a reservation. Somebody told them what to do, and they took their children away. And they didn't have a voice at all. And they were killed, and we treated them so inhumanely. It's just the saddest thing.
Yeah.
I like the character of the German fella that always was looking after looking after the boys, Albert and Odie and Mose and Emmy. And so it was always, they had these characters. In every bad situation, there was a good character. I noticed he did that. Like, I was so afraid when they got to that revival tent. I said, oh my gosh, could you think of all those people as like, oh, sleazy, they're going to do something to these kids. And Sister Eve was a good person. I thought, oh gosh, she's keeping a room for other bad reasons, but no, she was a good person. And anyone have any thoughts about revival tents or any experience with the revival tents?
No.
Well, I have one experience. So back when my son was maybe 4 or 5, his little playmate, they invited him. They said, well, we're going to take him to our church. And I said, well, that would be fine. Let him I trusted these people. And then when he came home, he described it as a big tent. And I was like, oh no, I let my kid go on. And he said, and they tried to burn the Bible, Mom. They kept trying to burn this book and it wouldn't burn. And I'm like, oh geez. So that was in the 80s, so early 80s. So I don't know if revival tents are still in places, but that was my experience. I sent my son to a revival tent.
I'm sure they're in the
Do you
South.
really think that Sister Eve was really a good person or she was a manipulator?
Oh, I think she was a really good person.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think she was both. I mean, I think she was both. I mean, she had to. I mean, to be successful, just like Sid. I mean, you were a little skeptical of him, but he was the one that made stuff happen and turned out to be a pretty good guy, especially when it wasn't drugs, it was the anti-venom in his.
Oh, I know. That was awful.
That was
Oh my
awful. And even and even One-Eyed Jack, I mean, he turned out to be a good person too and helped them eventually. So some of these people,
Even though he kept him locked up?
well, after he came back, the second time when he came back again, when he saw them the second time, and he was back with his wife and his daughter. No, he wasn't good when he was drinking and all of that. No, he's a terrible person. But at the end, he seemed to say, thank you for showing me the way back to sobriety and everything. So in the end, after he stopped drinking, he turned out to be a human, and he said he was sorry for what he did.
I think he was a very sad soul.
Yeah, that part, they never explained. Remember I think Odie ran across those mounds of dirt out in the orchard area that looked like they were fresh graves. They never explained that. That certainly was kind of a red herring though, to lead you to believe that possibly the guy had killed people.
Or the ripped up mattress that like maybe he killed the guy with a lover and that had me go in there.
Yeah, he did that. I noticed he did that occasionally in the book. Like he led you to think this is going to happen, and it wasn't. That was a lot happened in this book. There was always something, as Maureen said. It was just constant. No dull minute.
It made you keep reading.
Yeah.
And it made you keep thinking. Think about what you just postulated. He constantly kind of threw in things that made you keep thinking. And I totally agree with Maureen that it was compelling, that you wanted to know. I read this book in 2 days.
Right.
Not to keep reading. And because of the pandemic, I have the luxury of being able to do things like that. But which is a silver lining.
That's right.
There are some silver linings to this horrible situation. But yeah, he's a very clever author, and he does, as Maureen pointed out, he does excellent research. And he puts things in, and he constantly makes you use your mind. Yeah, I thought it was a very, very good read, and I'm glad we read it. As I said earlier, I had a hard time with it. I put it down 3 times.
I listened to it, and I first started to read it, and then it was a free download on Hoopla.
Yeah, I listened to it too, but they didn't have the epilogue, so you had to read.
I know.
the epilogue.
I said I had no idea, and I went and read the epilogue. It kind of just drops you, and you're to figure out the ending, like what happens to the mother. Did she wake up from her coma? You don't know that until you read that epilogue, and yeah. So it was it was good to listen. I liked listening. It was introduced by the author in the beginning, and then it was read by a different person. I think he could have read it. He has a good speaking voice. I like when authors read their own works, but yeah, and then he talks at the end. So it was a nice audio book. For I think 5 of the hours, my 9-year-old granddaughter listened to it, and I was ready to pause it if there was something bad. And there was nothing ever that I needed to pause for. I wouldn't let her watch the news at night. When she stayed with me for 2 weeks, I couldn't watch the news because I want her to know about. But I was okay with this book, and she said, I like that book.
What did you do about passages about the beatings with a 9-year-old?
No, we started after that.
Okay.
Because it was like the middle of the book. I turned it on.
It just haunted me. And then when I finally found out what happened to Mose, I was just like,
oh,
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
yeah.
so
No, I was ready to pause it, and I never needed to, but it was the middle of the book. It was when they had started on the river and met up with the revival tent, and all of that was, it was okay. And you have to think of a 9-year-old, they don't read into things like we do. I mean, we bring a lot of knowledge to the story, and a 9-year-old's it's the words and it's the story. And that brings me to Odie being a storyteller. That was his gift, and his little story that he would tell about the imp and the vagabonds. I like that, and his harmonica playing. All of that added to him. And in the epilogue, I don't remember, maybe Marcia, you remember in the epilogue, was he an author for his life? I know did it say what he did as a
I
career?
don't know. This maybe somebody else knows who read. I can get it. I have a book.
I got the impression that he had written this story. I don't know, somehow. I mean, when didn't he start out by saying,
the start of the book, I thought he said,
Yeah.
here's
I
a
thought
story.
at some point he made it sound like he had written the
Yeah.
story when he was 8.
Yeah, and it's not all. It's a story, and there's some truth to it, and some.
Right.
And he
Yeah.
ends the book like that too.
Right.
Starts
I was
like that.
I was amazed at his vocabulary. That I don't know. His dad was a con man, and I mean, I just thought when he was some of the words he used, Odie, the character when he was telling his stories, and I just was sort of like, wow, he's got just an amazing vocabulary for a Depression era. I don't know, maybe I'm being.
I thought the same. I thought that he did have a lot, he seemed like he was older, like he was really well schooled or something.
Yeah.
Some of the vocabulary, some of his thoughts. Yeah, I agree with that.
One
The
of the
loss of
things.
his mom too was,
Yeah.
and of course Emmy's.
perhaps the reason Odie was a storyteller and had the music was in one way, it facilitated him being in charge of the group, keeping the group together, bonding, because both talents eased the pain that the group was.
Mhm.
It was like they added levity. It made him. It helped them on their odyssey. It helped them on their journey when he told the stories, and when he played music, it helped. And one thing I was amazed at when I read the playlist was that I knew the words to most of those songs. And that's not my era, But I found that very interesting.
Yeah, we all do. I think we all know most of the words.
Yeah.
No, I thought about that this morning, Marcia. If you hand this book to a 40-year-old, I don't think they know.
Oh, no, they won't know.
Yeah, but those are classic songs, I think.
And
They
it
are
was
to
our
us.
music when we
They
were
are to
growing
us.
up. I mean, when we went to music class, that's
Yeah.
the songs we learned.
Well, and Gershwin, I mean, who doesn't know? I mean,
Yeah.
those are timeless. Yeah.
Eno Gershwin. I mean, there were songs that he was playing that I thought, how does this kid in an orphanage in Minnesota know these songs? How was he exposed to that music? I wasn't as amazed by the vocabulary as it was by his repertoire of music.
And I think anytime he was in a difficult situation, like in the Hooverville, he was able to use the music in the revival tent. He was always able to use the music to ease the situation, not just with his own vagabonds, but it made them include him more because of his talents and Albert's talents. I mean,
Yeah, with his mechanical skills and everything. And it goes further on to say in World War II, Albert, did all this mechanical work on these ships and stuff, and he got a degree in engineering. So these guys must have been pretty bright to be able to
Yeah.
get to college and get degrees from that school, because that school certainly did not.
They were very resourceful people. And were they forced to be resourceful? Yes. Were they inclined to be so? Yes. And it just added to their whole being and the way they got through. But resourceful is I think, a good word to describe them.
yeah.
I think that would be like a sign of the times too. There wasn't all the distractions that kids have now, and they were just required to be with their parents and helping along. So you pick up a lot of skill that way. Kids today just don't get those opportunities.
I agree. That's
Well,
what
and
I
go
said.
ahead.
I just loved how they just got in the canoe and they handled everything. And if you took 4 kids today and put them in a canoe and said, okay, here's $250, float down this river and figure it out. It would be like, what, how do we do this? What do we do? And yeah, I mean, kids today have
They remembered their Boy Scout stuff and all those things they learned from this one Boy Scout leader, all these different techniques. And I knew when they had talked about that in the beginning that it was going to come into play at some point, because of course I knew they were going to go on the river. So yeah, but those types of things were, they learned how to do those things from those skills. Which,
And I think, I think their background with their father too, moving around constantly and dealing with different people and that sort of thing. I think that gave them some insights and some skills as well, that they added the Boy Scouts to that, and they did well. They did really well, I think.
I like in the book how Odie compares God in different ways, like the tornado God. And I think, I'm like, yeah, it's an angry God. And then Sister Eve teaches them that it's a forgiving God. I think that was one of her major roles in the story, is to get that negativity out of Odie. He had that like hanging over his head all the time, that the tornado god, the fear there, and he was able to forgive God thanks to Sister Eve. She taught him forgiveness. So I like that.
Well, it was interesting that this, theme of spirituality or religion and God, and that was either a threat or a comfort throughout the storyline, as well as the healing power of music and storytelling, which Odie, of course, was using throughout his journey. It just really, I mean, in a weird sort of way, these kids were pretty well equipped with the skills that they had at a very young age to take on this journey, which is pretty surprising.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie Unforgiven. Cowboy movie with Clint Eastwood, and it was fairly realistic. I mean, they left a little boy like 6 or 8 years old to tend the farm, and he went off. I think that, they taught kids at an earlier age how to survive these things. And not that they were 8 or 10, but I mean, I think they were taught how to survive. Our kids, they were saying that kids just are immature longer now than they were at that time because of the things they had to do. They had to learn these skills on the farm. They had to learn how to shoot. They had to learn how to survive in these elements, where our kids don't have to learn those skills. And so
Well,
it's
I
think
be a devil's advocate for a moment about our kids. I don't have children, first of all, so this is all speculation on my part. Children go to school now, it's my understanding, and one of the things they learn is a lockdown. And they learn to be looking over their shoulder. And the other night, TAP, Third Avenue Playhouse, sponsored reading 10-minute plays, and they were about gun violence. And I could only listen to 3 of them. I had tears in my eyes. In the first play, 4 teenagers talk about the safest place to be inside a school and how that person might have a gun. I think, what do you think about what children have to learn now? What are children facing right now? Everybody wears a face mask everywhere. You can't hide it from a kid outside that this is going on. You can't hide it from a kid that the pandemic is going on. Kids don't go to school. They physically don't go. So I think that the Depression, we're all lauding that the Depression gave these kids resources and skills. But what do you think your grandchildren are going to be like? Do you think your grandchildren are going to be resourceful, intelligent people because of the pandemic, because of gun violence? Don't you think kids are a lot more mature? When I was a kid, I certainly never thought about when I went to school where the safest place to be was, or that anybody might have a gun.
no, we went under our desk because of the.
That's right. Yeah, we were under our desk.
Yes.
Yeah.
And think about how stupid that was.
Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah.
pretty dumb that a desk would
Wasn't that stupid?
protect you from a bomb. I always thought it was just ridiculous.
For an atomic attack, you
It
go
was
to the
a
desk and
scare tactic.
tornado drill where you go and
I'm
I
on,
think
I'm on
it's
the
different
computer.
skills. I think they learned skill. I think these kids are learning skills that will help them now, and I think the other kids learn skills that would help them then. Trissa, I think that you're right in that respect. These kids are learning skills that will help them survive now, whereas in the 30s they were learning skills that would help them survive at that time. So I think it just depends on what is needed as a skill at that time in history. Maybe that's perspective, because they didn't have to worry about, well, they did have the flu epidemic, and they did have, they
The
had
school
stuff
was long
like that.
over by then.
But
And they
these
had
kids in this book really had no
smallpox, and
choice.
you
I mean, they
had
just had to
polio.
learn. It wasn't
Sure.
really learning, it was just there was no choice. Nobody really taught him anything.
Right,
There's no choice now.
right.
That's true. Yeah.
There's no choice now.
But I think parents can steer, teach more, where these kids knew a lot because they were by themselves. They had no parents. Their parents were deceased. They were in a school, awful school. So I think it was just their consequences that taught them how to survive.
Well, again, the word is always used that children are resilient. And I said earlier, and I meant this, that I think one of the reasons these kids in this book survive is because they look at it through the eyes of a child. And Janine, Janine, as far as I'm concerned, alluded to that totally when she said her 9-year-old granddaughter, when I asked her, what did you do about the beatings? And she said she didn't listen to that they were past that. But she also said that kids see things differently, that they take things literally. And after I listened to these plays with Tap the other night, I thought, this is just horrible. Kids get put in horrible situations. I am one of the luckiest people in the world that I had the typical 50s, 60s middle-class upbringing with no stress, no muss, no fuss. But not everybody gets that in life. And this book is a constant example that there were kids, had to have been kids during the Depression that were okay. We read a book. Didn't we read in this group the way we were? No, I think it's another one. Never mind. But I just found this book incredibly compelling. I wanted to know what was going to happen to him. I found it incredibly thought-provoking. It sent me right out to reading about Indian schools, the Dakota uprising or the Dakota slaying of 1862. And I agree with what Jess said in the beginning. This is not the kind of book I would have picked up. So thank you for this. That's one thing I truly appreciate about this book club, the variety of things we read.
I agree.
Yeah,
Right. As I reserved this at my local library, and the librarian said to me, "Have you read Ordinary Grace?" And I said, "No, you must read that. It's better than this one." So,
yeah. I have to read it.
I've got that on reserve now.
Yeah, I'm going to read Ordinary Grace too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, what about the title, This Tender Land? Does anyone have any, how do you think
I
that
do. I didn't
plays
think
into
it
One reference to it, I agree with you. There's
didn't fit.
reference to it, and it comes from Jack.
Jack, right.
Oh,
I
that's
remember that.
right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I don't get it at all.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one.
I didn't get it either.
And that would have been a good question for the author.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one of the Q&As that he went through.
Well, I would just speculate that it might have something to do with the Native American culture, and throughout the story, all these farmers losing their land, and it's like once you realize the value of something, you cherish it more. So perhaps something along that line.
The land took care of them,
Yeah, the land.
The land, yes, right.
Yeah.
took care of them. So it was like, maybe on that, the tender land, that made sense. But I thought the title was a little, couldn't figure it out. But I guess the
Well,
land
but
did take.
in Native American culture too, everything that the land means. I mean, it's,
Yes, absolutely.
right. There's so much connected to their spiritual practice with the land. So that's how I interpreted it.
True, very true.
And interestingly enough, if you look at that aspect of it, Maureen, it's the first thing that was taken away from them.
Yeah, the Indians, yes, they're good
I
land.
just found it really curious because I remember when I read the sentence that Jack says it. Jack at this point's not a good person when he says it.
Right.
No.
You know, I was just really curious, like why Jack of all people would be the vehicle the author uses to.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But except he let his farm go, and then the kids came and helped him rebuild his orchard. And then he had the near death experience and saw it as, you know, a way to see the light and straighten out his life. So
Janine,
Yeah.
do you see that Nancy Larson is trying to get on? She's messaging me and saying that she can't get in. She's waiting.
Okay. Let me see. I have had.
I know we're pretty much almost done, but
Yeah.
All right. I was not able to. Let me see if I go here. Oh, geez. Okay. Admit. All right. And is she the chat?
She's
No,
there.
she's right there. She's coming
Here's
up.
Nancy.
There.
is she in?
Is
Yeah.
Nancy okay? Nancy.
There you are.
But
Now we
her-
can't hear you. You're on mute.
You have to unmute.
Nance, Nance, go to your lower left to the microphone and
Well,
click.
just hit yourself. Hit your picture and then.
No, Nance, go to the lower left screen and hit the microphone.
There you
There
are.
you
he's
go.
got it.
Hi,
Yeah.
Nance.
Okay.
She's in.
I'm in. Thank you.
Okay, you get to talk all the next 10 minutes now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I love the book.
Good.
Had you read anything else by this author?
No, I haven't, but I saw in the back of the book that she wrote another one, so I'd like to read it.
Yeah, me
I think
too.
we
It's
all
just,
want-
it was a good story. I mean, all of it was interesting. Although in general, I don't know, it didn't really have like an ending.
Did you read the epilogue? The epilogue kind of ties it all in.
Yeah, I did, yes.
So it did in that regard, but if you just read the book, like Janine and I listened to it, and luckily
Me
I
too.
wanted to read the end of the book, and I said, oh, there's this epilogue, and then after I read the epilogue, it kind of it tied it all up in that. But if we hadn't read the epilogue, we would still be kind of like swimming out there, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But one of the classes I took in school talked about how the Indian children had been abused in so many ways, you know, like that orphanage and like the schools that they went to. It's just so sad.
Oh.
You know, we tried to change them.
Yeah. Oof.
Well, we ruin everything. I mean, whenever missionaries went to like Hawaii, where you know, every place the European white person went, just ruined it. They ruined
Yeah.
land, and
Mhm.
you know, we're not nice. We're not good people. I mean, look, we're just not in that regard. We just want everybody to do what we want, and heaven forbid their ways are wrong, and that you know, there's only one way to do it.
And then
That's
you
not
lose,
I've always found that curious because you've been on a boat for a couple of months. You're in close quarters. Things haven't been the best. You land and you encounter an entire group of people from small children to grandparents. Granted, they don't look like you. Granted, they don't live in houses that look like you're used to. But you're hungry and they have food. And I just don't get why you're superior.
yeah.
I realize it's a very privileged 21st century perception, and I probably would have been the worst. I probably would have been right in there being horrible. I always hoped that I wouldn't be, like you hoped would have hit Anne Frank. But I just don't understand how as happened. It just
Well,
happened.
just think of the Spanish people going over and ruining the Aztec.
The same thing.
Yeah.
That was a gorgeous culture. That had incredible art. That had incredible skill.
Yeah, they had aqueducts and everything. I mean, they had a wonderful system, and they come in and ruin it.
Why do you think we're like that? The Irish and English and French. Why do you think
Well,
we
Stan-
think we're the best?
And Portuguese, any of these people, that all these explorers, wherever they went, they ruined the culture.
Well, I think it has to do with money and greed, Nancy. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
that, and it perpetuates itself, but I just,
Progress, I guess.
oh, whose progress, Sharon? Those people were living just quite
Well, America's, I guess, wrong, right or wrong, but
Well, that's the rationale.
Yeah.
Progress,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, they all wanted land or money. I mean, it's all about greed and money, and
Mhm.
you know, they will do anything. Just like they devastated the population because of fur, all the animals, the beavers and everything, because they came over and all these women wanted feathers or, you know, or furs,
Yeah.
and so they totally almost decimate the animals and the birds, and the birds become extinct because of greed. You know, they can get money for it.
Mhm.
I have a question. The author chooses to name the river Gilead. I don't have a lot of Bible knowledge. Is there, or I don't know if that's the right word. Is there a religious reference to the word, to naming? Does anyone feel that naming the river Gilead had something to do with it? Who was Gilead? What?
Yeah,
Gideon.
no, yeah, no clue.
Somebody Google it, quick.
I am right now.
I thought it was a religious reference. I thought it was a biblical reference.
I did too, but I didn't know what it meant, Nancy.
Yeah. I just took it as a biblical reference.
yeah. There is a pond that,
Hey, there it is. It says
Okay.
in the Jordan River, and they encamped at the wall of. So it is. But God informed Gideon. Okay, so it is in the Jordan River.
mhm.
It's in reference to that.
Thanks,
Does
Marcia.
it say what the name means?
It's heap of stones of testimony.
River. The
Heap of
Jordan River, they
stones.
say. Okay.
That's interesting. Because this is a testimony of their journey.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
And
What
is
does-
everyone versed on Homer? Because it's supposed to follow the poem.
The Odyssey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in a
Right.
review I read, when the author asks why the book's in 5 parts, I think is correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
It mimics the 5 parts of the Odyssey,
Yeah.
Right.
which I found really interesting that he said in this same interview that that was his favorite childhood story. I struggled with that in college.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? I love that book.
I struggled with it. You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I was always a big fan of Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, and I saw that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that it was.
Mhm.
And Pip in Great Expectations, they were where they in and out in a crowd and the con man aspect of it. Yeah, I saw all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. But not the Homer thing. I that.
I got it, but I didn't completely. I mean, I got the reference, but it's not the Homer thing. Odyssey is not something I struggled with.
Yeah. 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 I was reading, the author was saying when he wrote this book, he wanted to, in the beginning, he was trying to do a continuation for The Ordinary Grace, and it never came to him. And so this was like in the back of his mind for a long time, and he wasn't able to continue Ordinary Grace. So, but that was kind of what he was trying to do. So it'll be nice to read that book to figure out why he couldn't do it. But no one's read it, so you can't give us the answer.
Oh, there is a YouTube thing. I'm turning it off now. This Tenderland, William Ken Krueger book trailer, full version. There's a snippet on YouTube. If anyone is interested to hear. I don't know anything about it. I was just Googling stuff, and so
Yeah.
you can go on there and hear him talk about it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. It's always, that's what I seem to do when I finish a book. I start to go back and
Yeah,
get more from it.
do a little research.
Yeah, see what the author looks like, where he's from, all that kind of stuff, and what are his other books like, and yeah, I always like to do that after I've read a book. It stays with me for a while. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour for book club. Any final word? Some of people were muted today. Nancy?
Question. Since we've already read Station 11, are we mostly going to talk about the other book you had listed for next month?
I'm going to do mostly Glass Hotel with a little Station 11, because the Glass Hotel is supposed to be like a prequel.
Oh,
And so hopefully I haven't read the Glass Hotel. I have plenty of books for all of you. If you want to read Station 11, I'll have Station 11. I have lots of Glass Hotel. So
Are you open? Are you open today?
It's easier.
we are open today. I'm not there, but Sandy's there, and we're open until 2. It's on the book club shelf, and she'll need to check it out to you. If you want one put out on the cart, all you have to do is, okay, Nancy, I'll put yours out on the cart tomorrow morning. Wait till tomorrow morning. Jerry, do you want yours on the cart?
Yes, you can put mine on the cart too.
Okay. All right. I'm going to do a screen. All right. So last time I said, now who said that? So I have your pictures now. I can.
11, I just need the Glass Hotel.
Okay. Hey, Jerry, you're muted.
Jerry, hit unmute.
Unmute. Okay,
Okay.
now can you hear me?
Hey, she's
Can you hear me now?
unmuted.
I had a trouble. It stopped. The whole picture went away in the middle of your
Oh.
program. So I just got back. But I wanted to say, when he did that tie up at the end, didn't you think it was quirky that the main witch was and the mother were sisters? I thought that was very, very quirky.
Yeah.
The black oh God,
Black
her
Witch.
name.
Black Witch.
Yeah.
Black Witch, yeah.
The black, the lady that was in the orphanage that was tracking him down.
Right.
She's the sister of the mother of Odie.
No,
So
no.
you don't get it.
Okay. With
Back. What's her name? I got notes, but I don't remember. And we're going to quit. But anyway, thought it was funny. I love the book. I love William Kent Krueger. All of his books. They're really good.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
can't
you
say
Have
read,
you
the
read
same
The
about-
Ordinary Grace? Have you read Ordinary
Oh yeah,
Grace?
that was the first one I read, and he came to the library and talked in person many years ago.
Yeah, that was their
Um,
big read years ago.
The author, yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. But this new one, I don't know. Is the glass house going to be the same?
Glass Hotel.
It's going to be a continuation of what?
No, it's a prequel. It will be
Oh, the prequel.
happening, yeah,
okay.
before the pandemic hits. So isn't that interesting
I-
that the Station 11 is the pandemic story?
Yeah, but it was too far out.
I know, but it's just
Well, you
weird
haven't-
that it would be.
I read it. And I didn't like it. I
Oh.
read it and I didn't like it at all. So I don't think I'm
saw
going to read the glass house.
I saw an interview from the Penn Faulkner Foundation with 3 pandemic authors, and the only one I'm going to be able to retain is Stephen King. The other one was a South African woman who wrote Afterland, and the other one was a Canadian woman. And when they were asked who they thought was another author that exemplified pandemic, in unison, they all said Emily St. James Mandel.
Wow.
I've heard very mixed things. Like some people have said, why the hell would they pick that book to read during the pandemic? And I said, well, first of all, they didn't pick it during the pandemic. And
Right.
people have been like, I'm not going to read it. And I'm like, oh, read it. And about the Glass House, if you had trouble getting into the pandemic, which, or the Station 11, which I did, it's the Glass House is Emily St. John's Mandel, who I think is a very strange author. Good, but strange. It's easier.
Yeah,
It's easier.
Okay.
it's easier. I got into it, but I just didn't, it just kept going on, and it was just kind of too unreal to be believed, in my opinion.
Oh, Station 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just went on and on and on and got kind of boring.
Well, it's
I'll
interesting.
have
Kinda
to
like
go,
our
but I would
pandemic.
like to say to everyone, thank you very much. As
Yeah.
always, it's a pleasure to see you. And I hope you all have the best of the holidays. And thanks again. See you in January. I gotta go. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And hey, everyone, anyone who
Bye.
asks for a book, they'll be outside tomorrow after 10 o'clock. So don't come at 10, maybe a little after 10. And I'll have a book available for you.
Okay.
So thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Happy
Janine.
holidays.
Great. Thank you.
Happy
Thank
holidays.
you.
Bye-bye.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye now.